The stars hung cold and silent in the deep black of space. Far beyond the edge of known systems, where most ships dared not go, a small warship moved slowly through the void. It was not sleek like the alien vessels of the great empires. It had no glowing shields, no invisible cloaks, no weapons that burned holes in reality. It was made of steel, fire, and human will. Its name was Aegis, a word from an old Earth language that meant protection. Inside, the lights were dim, the air warm with the hum of machines and quiet voices. Captain Anya Rostova stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes fixed on the view screen. She was not tall. She did not wear shining armor. But when she spoke, everyone listened. Her face was calm, but behind her dark eyes, storms raged. Memories of war, of loss, of a world that had burned and still refused to die. They had been traveling for weeks. No colony, no fleet, no backup. Just one ship, carrying the hopes of a species still learning to reach the stars. Earth had only joined the galactic community a few years ago. The aliens called them latecomers, primitive, emotional. They were given no real power, no voice in the councils of the mighty. Humanity was a child at the table of giants. But now, they were here in neutral space, near the border of the KVAR in hegemony, a ruthless empire that had crushed dozens of civilizations without a second thought. And the Kavarn had noticed. On the screen, a massive ship appeared, a jagged mountain of black metal, glowing with red fire along its edges. It was 10 times the size of the Aegis. Around it, smaller warships formed a deadly circle. This was not a greeting. It was a warning. Unidentified vessel, came a deep, cold voice through the comms. You have entered restricted space. Power down your engines. Surrender control, or be destroyed. Silence filled the bridge. Lieutenant Malik Chen turned to Rostova. Captain, we can't fight them. One shot from that flagship, and we're gone. Rostova didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the monster ahead. We're not here to fight, she said quietly. Then what are we doing? Whispered young Jacques Torin, the ship's engineer, his hands shaking on the console. Rostova finally turned. Her voice was soft, but strong, like steel wrapped in cloth. We're here to show them who we are. And she gave the order. Hold course. No evasive moves, no shields up. Just keep flying. The crew stared at her. Some were afraid, some were confused. But none questioned her, because they remembered. They remembered Earth, not as it was now clean and green, but as it had been, broken, poisoned, torn by war. They remembered the fires, the floods, the hunger. They remembered parents who walked for days to save their children, soldiers who laid down guns to help the wounded, scientists who worked through the night to stop plagues. Humanity had not survived because it was the strongest. It had survived because it refused to give up. And now, in this quiet corner of space, that same spirit floated in a small, unimpressive ship, heading straight into the jaws of a monster. The Kavarn hailed again, louder, angrier. Final warning. Power down, or be erased. Still, the Aegis flew forward. Then light. A blinding flash filled the screen. Impact. The ship shook like a leaf in a storm. Alarms screamed. Sparks fell from the ceiling. 2 crew members were thrown to the floor. Lights flickered. Smoke rose from a broken panel. Forward shields gone, Malik shouted. Hull breach on deck 3, sealed, but we're losing oxygen. Rostova grabbed the rail, her body swaying, but her feet stayed firm. Are we still moving? She asked. Malik checked the nav screen. Yes, Captain, still on course. Rostova nodded. Good. Jacques looked at her, eyes wide. They hit us. Why aren't we running? She turned to him, calm as the space between stars. Because if we run, they'll never see us. They'll only see fear, and fear is easy to crush. She walked to the center of the bridge, her voice rising. They think we're weak because we feel, because we cry. because we remember our dead. But that's not weakness. That's what keeps us human. That's what makes us strong. She faced the view screen again. They want us to beg, to hide, to disappear. Her voice dropped, like a whisper in a storm. We won't. And just then, the Kavarn flagship fired again. Another pulse of red energy tore through space. The Aegis shuddered harder this time. Lights died, gravity flickered, but still, it moved forward, unbroken, not fast, not flashy, just there, and, for the first time, on the bridge of the mighty Kavarn warship, silence fell, because no one, no species in all their long history, had ever taken to direct hits, and kept coming. Asterisk, he Aegis floated like a wounded bird in the endless dark. Smoke curled from its side. Wires hung loose from broken panels. One engine sputtered, coughing sparks into the cold vacuum. The ship was damaged badly, but it was still flying, still moving forward. Inside, the air smelled of burnt metal and sweat. Lights flickered in red and blue, casting long shadows across the crew's tired faces. Some held bandaged arms, others whispered prayers or checked their stations with shaking hands, but no one sat down. No one gave up. Captain Rostova stood at the front, her uniform torn at the shoulder, a thin cut on her cheek. She didn't wipe the blood away. She just watched the massive Kavarn flagship on the screen, silent now, not firing, not moving. It loomed like a mountain of night, its red glow pulsing like a slow, angry heartbeat. Why did they stop? Jocks asked, his voice small. He was still at engineering, fingers flying over cracked screens. They could destroy us with one more shot. Malik Chen leaned over the tactical console, eyes scanning the alien fleet. They're not moving in. No boarding craft. No final warning. Nothing. It's like they don't know what to do. Dr. Alira Moss, the ship's scientist, looked up from her data pad. Her hands were steady, but her voice trembled with wonder. Maybe they've never seen anything like us. We took 2 direct hits. Any other ship would be dead. But we're still here, still coming. Rostova turned slowly. We're not just a ship to them. We're a question. A question, Malik asked. She nodded. They expected fear. They expected surrender, or rage. But we gave them neither. We took their fire, and kept walking. That doesn't make sense to them. Power is everything to the Kavarn size. Strength, control. But we showed them something else, something they can't measure. Like what? Jocks asked. Like courage without noise, she said softly. Like standing up. Not because you can win, but because it's right. Silence fell on the bridge. Even the hum of the damaged engines seemed quieter. Then, Alira spoke again. They're scanning us. Deep scan, not weapons, sensors. They're trying to understand us. Malik frowned. Let them look. They'll see patched holes, old fusion core, human-made parts held together with welds and hope. They'll see a ship that shouldn't even be in deep space. Rostova smiled, just a little. And yet, here we are. Outside, the Kavarn flagship shifted. A single beam of light, not a weapon, reached out and touched the Aegis. It was a signal, a scan, a question. Back on the alien bridge, High Marshal Drozik watched the data flood in. His 4 eyes narrowed as the numbers scrolled. Vessel, human design, U, E, D, V, J's, age, 12 years. Armor, reinforced, titanium steel, composite. Weapons, magnetic rail cannons, primitive. Propulsion, fusion thrust system, inefficient. Shields, basic energy deflection, low yield. He read it all. Then he saw the damage report. Impact 1, direct hit 2 forward section. Shields failed. Hull, cracked, repaired in 8 minutes by onboard crew. Impact 2, critical damage to starboard engine. System offline. Backup, ignited manually. Vessel maintained. Course, Drossik turned to his commander. How? Their ship should be dead. The commander checked again. Their crew, they fixed it during the attack. No retreat, no panic. They worked while under fire. Drossik stared at the small, broken ship on the screen. They are not warriors. They are not conquerors. So what are they? No one answered. Because no Kavarn had ever been taught to name a species that fights not for glory, not for land, but for dignity. Back on the Aegis, Jox suddenly gasped. Captain, they're opening a channel. Not a threat. A private line. Directed at you. All eyes turned to Rostova. She took a slow breath, put it through. The screen flickered. Then, a face appeared. Drossik, his dark, armored head filling the screen. His eyes unreadable. Captain, he said, his voice deep, slower now, not angry. You took 2 grab pulse strikes. You should not be alive. Rostova met his gaze. We shouldn't, but we are. Why did you not flee? Because running wouldn't change your mind. Change it to what? To see us, she said, not as weak, not as threats, but as people. Drossik was silent for a long moment. Then, you are illogical. You risk everything for a message. Rostova smiled, just a little. That's what makes us human. Another silence. Then, softly, Drossik said, send them. Our story. Illyra looked up. What story? The one from Earth. The voices. The child who drew stars. Rostova nodded. You want to know who we are? Yes, Drossik said. Show me. She turned to her crew. Illyra, play it. And from the Aegis, a soft signal flew across space. Not a weapon, not a threat, a lullaby, a child's voice, a dream, and for the first time in thousands of years, the great war machine of the Kavarn stood still and listened. The signal left the Aegis like a whisper in a storm. Not a blast of energy, not a weapon, just sound soft, clear, and human. It traveled across the cold space between the 2 ships, riding on a narrow beam of light, carrying voices from a small blue planet most aliens had never cared to visit, and then, inside the massive Kavarn flagship, the speakers came to life. A child's voice filled the silent bridge. My name is Lena. I'm 7. I live in New Shanghai. I draw pictures of stars. One day, I want to meet aliens. I hope they're nice. Hi, Marshal. Drossik froze. So did every warrior around him. The voice was small, fragile. It should have been meaningless to a race that crushed planets without blinking, but it wasn't. It hurt, because no Kavarn child had ever spoken like that. Their young were trained in combat by age 5. Dreams were called weakness. Hope was erased. But this was something else. The recording continued. I'm Omar, said a boy's voice. I lived through the Jakarta floods. My parents saved people with a little boat. We had no food, but they shared what we had. I believe people can be good, even when everything is broken. A pause. Then another voice, older, tired, but warm. I'm Dr. Amara. I lost my family in the Eurowar. I spent 10 years healing others. Not because I forgot the pain, but because I remember it. One by one, the voices came. A farmer from Kenya, who grew food in the desert. A musician from Rio, who played guitar for refugees. A scientist on Mars, who looked at Earth from afar and cried. Not from fear, but from love. No weapons, no threats, no demands, just stories of loss, of pain, of kindness after darkness. On the Aegis, the crew listened in silence. Some wiped their eyes. Jox held his breath. Even Malik, the tough lieutenant, looked away, blinking fast. They had heard the recording 100 times. But now, sending it to a warship that had tried to kill them, it felt different, like handing a flower to a storm inside the Kvarn bridge. No one moved. Drossik stood tall, but his hands trembled. His 4 eyes stayed fixed on the speaker. as if the voices could reach inside his chest and touch something long buried. Then, a young Kavarn officer, barely out of training, whispered, "Why? Why are they showing us this?" Drazik didn't answer, because he knew. They weren't showing strength, they were showing soul, and that was something that Kavarn had no defense against. For thousands of years, they had built their empire on fear, conquer, control, crush. That was power. That was order. But these humans, broken, small, so young in the eyes of the galaxy, had done the unthinkable. They had looked into the face of destruction and offered a memory, not of war, but of hope. Drazik turned to his commander. "Pull back the fleet, lower weapons, all of them." The commander stared. "Marshal, they are still in our space. They defied us. We must see," Drazik snapped. "For the first time in our history, a weaker species has not fought us with fire, but with truth, and we are silent. That means something." He walked to the window, staring at the Aegis battered, glowing faintly, like a dying star that refused to go dark. "They do not fear us," he said quietly, "not because they are brave, but because they carry something we lost long ago." "What is it?" the young officer asked. Drazik closed his eyes. Kindness, back on the Aegis. Alarms had stopped. The ship still hurt. The air was hot. But the mood had changed. "They're powering down," Malik said, stunned. "All weapons, all shields, even the support ships." Jox laughed, half in disbelief, half in joy. "They're surrendering." "No," Rostova said, her voice soft. "They're listening." Illyra wiped her eyes. "We didn't win a battle. We won a moment." Rostova looked at her crew, tired, hurt, but standing tall. "We showed them who we are," she said. "Not soldiers, not conquerors, but people who remember how to care." And then, from the Kavarn channel, a new signal came. Not words, a sound. Low, slow, deep, like a drumbeat from a forgotten world. Illyra checked the translation. "It's a Kavarn morning song, but it's not for the dead." "Then what is it for?" She looked up, amazed. "It's for us, for our stories. They're honoring them." Rostova felt something rise in her chest. Not pride, not victory. Connection. Across the stars. Two species, one ancient and mighty. One young and scarred, stood in silence, not as enemies, not as master and servant, but as beings. One had shown pain, the other had answered with respect, and in that moment, something new was born. Not peace, not yet, but the chance for it, outside. The stars burned on, and for the first time, they didn't feel so far away. The battlefield was quiet. No explosions, no screams, no burning metal falling through space. Just two ships, one massive and dark, the other small and scarred, floating in the endless night. Between them, the silence was not empty. It was full. Full of something no weapon could carry, no empire could claim. Respect. Inside the Aegis, the crew sat in stunned stillness. The pain was still there, the ache in their bodies, the fear that had lived in their chests for hours. But now, something else had taken its place. Peace, not because the danger was gone, but because they had faced it. Together, and not broken, Captain Rostova stood at the front of the bridge, her hands resting on the command rail. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes said enough. They were tired, but they were proud. Malik leaned back in his seat, rubbing his neck. "They really pulled back," he muttered. "All of them. No tricks, no hidden moves." Illyra nodded, her voice soft. "They're not just standing down. They're honoring us. That song, it's ancient. The Kavarn only play it for the fallen, for those they admire." Jox looked up from his console, eyes wide. "They admire us, but we're the ones who got hit. We're the ones falling apart." Rostova turned to him. "That's why." He blinked. "What?" She stepped forward, her voice calm, but strong. They don't admire power. They've seen power all their lives. What they don't understand, what they've never seen, is someone who gets knocked down and just keeps walking. She looked around the bridge, at the cracked screens, the burned wires, the bandaged arms. We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we were human. We hurt, we fear, but we care. And we don't give up. Not on our ship, not on each other, not on the idea that things can be better. A long silence followed. Then Malik whispered, I think they finally saw us. Outside, the Cavaron flagship remained still. Its weapons were dark, its engines quiet. But something was happening. Lights began to flash along its surface. Not in warning, not in attack. In pattern. Alira frowned, studying the signal. It's not a message in words. It's rhythmic, like a code. Jox leaned in. Wait, I've seen this before. In the archives. It's an old Kavarn salute, used only once, after a great sacrifice. They're sending it to us. Rust felt a lump in her throat. They're saluting us. Yes, Alira said, her voice trembling. And look, the other ships are joining. One by one, the smaller Kavarn warships lit up, their hulls flashing the same slow, steady rhythm. A wave of light passed through the fleet, silent, powerful. Real docked. It was not a victory sign, it was a thank you, for showing them something they had forgotten. That courage is not the absence of fear, it is moving forward with it. Back on the bridge, High Marshal Drozik stood before his crew. His voice was low, but every warrior heard. We have faced many enemies. We have crushed armies, broken worlds, silenced voices. But today, we met a species that did not fight with weapons. They fought with truth. And we could not answer. He paused. They showed us their pain, their loss, their dreams. And instead of weakness, we saw strength, the kind that does not come from fire or steel, but from the heart. He looked at the young officer who had spoken earlier. You asked why they sent stories. Now you know. They were not defending their ship. They were defending their soul. The young Kavarn lowered his head. What do we do now, Marshal? Drozik turned to the screen, where the Aegis floated, battered, but unbroken. We learn. And then, slowly, he raised his four hands, not in threat, not in command, but in a gesture never before seen in Kavarn history. Open palms, facing forward, a universal sign. We see you. We respect you. We are listening. On the Aegis. The crew watched the signal come in. No words. No translation needed. They felt it. Jax wiped his eyes. They're saying sorry. Rostova shook her head. No, they're saying thank you. For teaching them something new. That even in the cold dark of space, kindness can be the strongest force of all. The stars burned above. The ships floated below. And for the first time in a long, long time, the universe felt a little less alone, because two species so different, so far apart had found one thing in common, not power, not fear, but the quiet, unbreakable will to be better. The silence between the ships lasted a long time, not the silence of fear, not the silence of waiting for attack, but the silence of understanding, slow, deep, like the first quiet morning after a storm. Then, a new signal came, not from the Kavarn flagship, from the smallest ship in their fleet. A single light blinked, slow, steady, 3 times. Then, again, and again. Alira leaned forward, eyes wide. That's not a weapon signal. It's a greeting code. Basic, universal. But they're using it willingly. Malik frowned. They're talking to us. No, Rostova said softly. They're trying. She turned to her crew. Open a channel. Low power. Just voice. The screen flickered. A face appeared. Not High Marshal Drozik, but a young Kavarn officer. His armor less heavy, his eyes unsure. He spoke slowly, as if choosing each word with care. This is Commander Vex of the Kavarn Tal. We do not know your ways. We have no words for what you have shown us, but we wish to learn. A pause. We offer safe passage. No weapons, no threats. You may leave Kavarn space in peace. The crew of the Aegis stared. Jax let out a shaky breath. They're letting us go. Illyra smiled. No, they're letting us live as equals. Rostova stood tall. Commander Vex, thank you. We accept your offer, but we do not leave yet. Vex blinked a Kavarn gesture of surprise. You? Stay? Yes, Rostova said. We came not just to cross your border. We came to open a dialogue. If you are willing, silence again, then. From behind Vex, another voice, deeper, familiar. Hi, Marshal Drazik, stepped into view. You risk much, human captain, he said. Even now, many in my fleet call you a fool, a threat. They say your kind is too emotional, too weak. Rostova didn't flinch. And what do you say? Drazik looked at her, not with anger, not with pride, but with something rare, curiosity. I say you stood when others would have fallen. You spoke when others would have fought, and you made us feel something we have trained ourselves not to do for centuries. He took a breath. So I ask you now, not as an enemy, not as a conqueror, but as one who wants to know what is it you want from us. Rostova stepped closer to the screen. We don't want land. We don't want power. We don't want your ships or your weapons. She paused. We want connection. We want to talk, to learn, to share stories, not just of war, but of life, of loss, of hope. She looked around her bridge, at her crew, at the broken panels, at the small earth flag taped to the wall. Because we know what it's like to be alone, to be ignored, to be called weak just because we care. And we don't want another species to feel that way. Drazik was quiet for a long time. Then he said, there is a place, a neutral station near the edge of our space. It has no name, number, master. It is forgotten. Rostova waited. If you wish, Drazik said slowly, come there. In 3 days. No weapons, no fleets, just you and us. We will talk. A real breath passed through the Aegis bridge. Jox grinned. Malik nodded. Illyra closed her eyes, as if in prayer. Rostova looked straight into the alien's eyes. We'll be there. The channel closed. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jox burst out, we did it. They're going to talk to us. Malik laughed. Not just talk. They're meeting us, on neutral ground. That's never happened before. Illyra wiped her eyes. This could change everything. Rostova didn't smile. Not yet. She looked out at the stars, at the vast emptiness between worlds. It's not just about peace, she said quietly. It's about trust. And trust doesn't come from treaties. It comes from one moment, when two beings look at each other and say, I see you, and I don't want to hurt you. She turned to her crew. We fixed this ship with our hands. We faced fire and didn't run. And now, we've opened a door no one thought could open. Her voice grew stronger. But this is only the first step. The real work starts now. Back on the Kavarn flagship, Drazik stood alone on his bridge, staring at the fading image of the Aegis. His commander approached. Marshal, are we truly doing this? Talking to a species we once called insects? Drazik didn't look away. Better to talk to insects who carry light, than to gods who only bring darkness. And far across the void, the Aegis turned slowly, its engines humming with quiet strength, heading not toward home, but toward a new beginning, toward a meeting, toward hope, toward the first real step in a long, long journey. And for the first time, the stars didn't just watch. They witnessed. 3 days passed like slow heartbeats. The Aegis moved carefully through the dark, its damaged engine humming like an old friend who refuses to give up. Repairs continued around the clock. Jocks and the engineering team patched the hull with plates from storage, welded them by hand, and rerouted power through backup systems that weren't supposed to last another week. But they held. Just like the crew. Captain Rostova slept little. She walked the ship each night, checking on her people, the medic treating a burn on a young officer's arm, the cook heating soup in the mess, the pilot whispering a message home to her daughter on Mars. They were tired, but they were ready. The meeting place was a small station, long abandoned. It hung in the quiet space between Kavarn and neutral systems, a rusted metal ring spinning slowly in the starlight. No flags, no weapons, no guards, just silence and the soft glow of distant suns. They called it Still Point. When the Aegis docked, the crew held their breath. No alarms, no red lights, no sudden attacks, just stillness. Rostova stood at the airlock in a simple gray uniform. No weapons, no armor, only a small earth pin on her chest, a blue globe wrapped in green. Behind her were 4 others: Malik, Elira, Jocks, and Dr. Chen, the ship's medic. Each had chosen to come. Each knew the risk. If anything goes wrong, Malik said quietly, we don't fight, we talk. Rostova nodded. And if they don't listen, then we keep talking. The door hissed open. On the other side, 3 Kavarn waited. No weapons, no heavy armor, just simple, dark robes. Their clawed hands open at their sides. At the center stood High Marshal Drazik. He did not speak at first. He looked at Rostova, really looked as if seeing her for the first time. Then slowly, he bowed his head, a gesture of respect. Rostova returned it. No words, no fanfare, just 2 leaders from 2 worlds, standing together in peace. They walked into a small chamber at the heart of the station. The lights were dim, the air was cold, but the room had been cleaned. A round table stood in the center. Not Kavarn design, not human, new, built for this moment. They sat silence again. Then Drazik spoke. We have no ritual for this, no ancient words. In my life, I have only known war, order, control. But you showed me something else. You took our fire and gave us stories. He looked at Elira. Why did you choose those voices? The child, the survivor, the healer. Elira met his gaze. Because those are the real ones. Not the generals, not the kings. The ones who live, who hurt, who still hope. Drazik lowered his head. We erase such voices. We call them weak. But now, I wonder, what have we lost by silencing them? Jocks, the youngest, spoke up. You didn't just lose voices, you lost connection. On Earth, we learned the hard way. When we stopped listening to each other, we almost destroyed everything. Drazik turned to him. And yet, you survived. Because we started again, Malik said. Not with more weapons, not with stronger walls, but with trust. With schools, with music, with food shared in the ruins. A long pause. Then Dr. Chen, the medic, said softly, we don't want to change you. We just want you to know there's another way. Not weakness, not fear, but care. The room was still. Then Drazik reached into his robe. The humans tensed. Just for a second. But he pulled out not a weapon. A book, old, bound in dark leather. This, he said, is the first book ever written in KVAR in history. It is not about war, not about conquest. It is a poem about a star falling in love with a moon. It was banned 3,000 years ago, called Dangerous, Soft. He placed it on the table. I kept it in secret, because I never stopped believing in it. Rostova felt tears in her eyes. She reached into her pocket and placed a small object beside the book, a music player. Inside, one song. She pressed play. A child's voice filled the room. My name is Lena. I draw pictures of stars. Drazik closed his eyes, and for the first time in his long, hard life, He felt, not anger, not pride, but peace. The others sat in silence, listening to the voice of a little girl from a blue planet far away. And in that moment, on a forgotten station, in the dark, something new was born. Not a treaty, not an alliance, but a beginning of understanding, of hope, of two species, so different, so far apart, finally learning the most powerful truth in the universe. The meeting lasted 6 hours. No guards, no weapons, no rushing, just talk. Voices rose and fell in the quiet chamber of Stillpoint, not in anger, not in debate, but in something rare. Listening, Captain Rostova spoke of Earth's darkest days, the wars that burned cities, the storms that drowned coasts, the times when people forgot how to be kind. But she also spoke of the mornings after, when strangers pulled others from rubble, when doctors worked without sleep, when children planted trees in the ashes. High Marshal Drozik listened, and for the first time, he did not judge. He felt. Then it was his turn. He spoke of the Kavarn Empire, not its victories, not its power, but its fear. Fear of chaos, fear of weakness, fear of losing control. So they built walls, crushed rebellion, silenced voices. We thought strength meant never bending, he said, his deep voice quiet. But you bend, and still, you do not break. Alira, the scientist, leaned forward. Bending is not weakness. It's how we grow, Malik added. On Earth, we have a word, resilience. It doesn't mean never falling, it means getting up, again and again. Jox, still nervous, but brave, said, maybe strength isn't about how much you can destroy. Maybe it's about how much you can protect. Silence followed. Then Drozik placed his clawed hand on the table, slowly, gently. We have no word for that kind of strength. But today, I think we need one. The humans smiled. Not with pride, but with hope. As the meeting ended, Drozik stood and did something no Kavarn leader had done in over 10,000 years. He reached out, not with a weapon, not with a command, but with an open hand. Rostova looked at it. Then, without hesitation, she placed her smaller human hand in his dot. No force, no show, just touch, a simple act, but across the stars. It echoed because when the Aegis left Stillpoint and sent a simple message, peace made, dialogue begun. The galaxy watched. The Sylph of Zyra, a race of crystal beings who communicated in light, flashed a single color, blue, their sign for new beginning. The floating minds of Zenvok composed a song using human melodies, soft, slow, full of rising notes, like a sunrise. Even the cold, logical Vorth collective paused their endless calculations and sent one short message. Emotion has value. We did not know. On Earth, people gathered in cities, on Mars, on space stations. They didn't cheer. They stood together. Some held candles, some played music, some just looked up at the stars and whispered, we did it. Not we won, we reached out. Back on the Aegis, the crew floated in quiet joy. The ship was still broken. The journey home would be long, but their hearts were light. Jock sat in the mess, drawing on a scrap of paper, a sketch of the Kavarn book. The music player, the table where two species had met. Malik stood at the view window, arms crossed. You think it'll last? He asked Rostova. She didn't look away from the stars. It has to. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Alira joined them, holding a data pad. I just got word. The Concord Council wants to meet with us, they said. They want to learn from what we did. Malik laughed. The same council that called us emotional children. Yes, Alira said, smiling. And now they're asking, how did humans do it? Rostova finally turned. We didn't do anything special. We just stayed human. And far across space, on the Kavarn homeworld, something incredible happened. In the Great Hall of Echoes, where only war songs had been sung for centuries, a single voice began to sing. not a battle hymn, a lullaby. The tune was unfamiliar, soft, gentle. It was the song from the Aegis, Lena's song, and one by one, others joined, not in anger, not in pride, but in peace. Because sometimes, the loudest revolutions do not begin with guns. They begin with a voice, a hand, a story, and the quiet courage to say, "We are here, we are not afraid, and we want to be friends." 1 year later, the stars looked the same, cold, distant, endless, but the galaxy had changed. Not because of war, not because of new weapons, but because of a small human warship, a broken hull, and the courage to stand still when the universe demanded surrender. On the edge of known space, a new station rose, not of steel or alien alloy, but built from pieces of 100 worlds. Human solar panels, Kavarn energy cores, Sylth crystal lights. It floated in silence, spinning slowly like a child's toy, its name glowing in simple letters across its side, Still Point, House of Voices. Inside, there were no weapons, no armies, no flags, only rooms. Rooms for talking, rooms for listening, rooms for listening, rooms where a Kavarn warrior once known for crushing rebellion, now taught young officers how to listen before they spoke, where human teachers showed alien children how to draw stars, just like Lena, where recordings played day and night, not of battles, but of laughter, of songs, of stories from Earth, from KVAR, from dozens of species who had once been enemies. Captain Anya Rostova stood at the center of it all, not as a ruler, not as a hero, but as a guest. She wore no uniform, just a simple coat, the earth pin still on her chest. Around her, Kavarn and humans walked side by side. Some spoke, some sat in silence, some just watched the stars. High Marshal Drozik approached, his steps slow, his face older, but his eyes softer. "They still call you the woman who stood," he said. Rostova smiled. "I didn't stand alone. No," he said. "You stood with your people. That is what made you strong." They walked to a quiet balcony, looking out at the endless dark. "Do you ever miss war?" Rostova asked. Drozik was quiet for a long time. "Yes, not the killing, but the certainty. In war, I knew who the enemy was. Now, I must learn a new way. It is hard." She nodded. "Peace is harder, because it asks more of us. It asks us to care, to trust, to hope." He looked at her. "And you never stop." "Never," she said. "Because we've seen what happens when we do. On Earth, we burned our world. We fought each other for centuries, and every time we stopped hoping, we fell." She turned to him. "But every time we kept hoping, even when it made no sense, we rose again." Drozik placed a clawed hand on the rail. "We have begun to teach this. In our schools, our homes, we play your recordings. We read your books. We even sing your songs." Rostova felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you." He shook his head. "No, thank you. You did not come with fire. You came with truth, and it changed us." Inside the station, a bell rang, not loud, but clear, like a single note from a glass flute. It was time for the daily story hour. Children, human, Kavarn, even a few from distant worlds, gathered in a soft-lit room. Some sat on the floor, some leaned on parents. All were quiet. A young Kavarn girl stood up, her voice small, her claws fidgeting. She held a book. She opened it, and in careful, slow words, she began to read. "My name is Lena. I am 7. I live in New Shanghai. I draw pictures of stars." The room fell into deep silence, not out of fear, not out of duty, but out of love. Because now, Lena's dream had come true. She had reached the stars. And the aliens. They were nice. Later, Rostova stood alone at the edge of the station, looking out at the galaxy. Malik joined her. Hard to believe, isn't it? One ship, one moment. And now, this. She didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, "We didn't change the galaxy with weapons. We changed it with heart. He smiled. Guess that's the one thing no empire can copy. She looked up, past the station, past the ships, past the stars, to the dark dot, to the unknown, and she knew. This was not the end. It was only the beginning, because as long as there were people who refused to hate, who chose to speak when silence was easier, who reached out a hand instead of a fist, then light would always find a way, even in the deepest dark, even across the widest void. And as the stars burned on, one final truth echoed through the silence, not in words, not in signals, but in the quiet pulse of hope.